And we do have a distinguished panel, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in just a minute. But I want to say something about this panel, this topic, before we start up. And this is something, and if you've had a chance to look at the resume of these individuals, you'll see that they know a lot about how you hire people, and not only how you identify them, but then how you attract them and how you pay them and what the options are. And you know, there's a truism that says, you know, if you are an individual, you know, you are what you eat. If you're a company, you are what you hire. And your employees are the people that actually are going to determine the culture and the success of your firm. So this is a very important topic, and I think you're very fortunate to be able to listen to these people today. I'm going to pass out something that's on the other side of this spectrum, and you're not supposed to be looking at it when you're listening to this panel, but it's something called Organizational Blueprints for Success in High-Tech Startups. And this is a study that was done by the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies by Jim Barron and Mike Hannon. And what they did was they studied the kinds of companies, the kinds of organizational blueprints that companies had when they first started. And they came up with a number of different models that they were able to identify based on the three criteria. One, what was the basis of connection? All right, was it compensation? Was it quality of the work? Was it work working as a community? So they say money, work, love. And then what was the criterion for selection? So that's how you would try to attract someone. And then they said, so how did you select them? What was the main criterion you used for selection? Skills, talent, or fit. And then the third was means of coordination and control. So how did you actually get these individuals to perform and do what you wanted them to do? And there they had four different categories. One, direct monitoring, peer and or cultural control, reliance on professional standards, formal processes and procedures, and then they identified some basic models that they found in Silicon Valley. One was a STAR, and the attachment was work, the selection was potential, and the coordination was professional. They had the engineering model, which was the most likely model in Silicon Valley, where the attachment was work and the selection was skills, and the coordination was peer and cultural. The bureaucracy model, where the attachment was work, and the selection was skills, and the coordination was formal. And then they had the direct control, where the attachment was money. You pay, I work. Selection was skills, and the coordination was control. And what this paper will do for you is go through and let you see some of the implications that they found that flowed from which type you started with, in terms of your success factors, your likelihood of having an IPO, and your likelihood of being able to attract other employees into your company. So that's what this will be, and I'll pass it around once we get started here. So I'd like to start now by asking the panel to tell you a little bit about themselves, maybe a little bit more than was in the little vita that you were able to see. For instance, Mike will tell you that he just left a meeting with Sergio Brin because he sold his company to Google 2 days ago. That wasn't in your resume. So Mike graduated from MIT and the Harvard Business School, and that was his fourth company. Is that right?
Yeah.
So say a little bit more about yourself and what you like to do.
I like to start companies, and I like to sell them. So I've had four. One was computer telephony. One was internet search engine. One was Xfire, which is an instant messenger for PC video gamers. And the last one, Ruba, was in the travel space, and we just sold it to Google on Friday and started there on Monday. And I was just in a meeting with Sergey, which I left for this. So I like running and hiking and long walks with strangers. No.
Singing in the rain.
Maybe that's it. One more mile.
Huh?
One more?
That's fine. Okay.
So I'm
Emily.
Emily Melton. I work at Mayfield Fund.
Oh, wait.
I'm,
Emily,
I was gonna
invested
do this.
okay, go ahead.
Mayfield Fund. So I'm the token venture capitalist because I don't know that I have as much value to add as these individuals. But what I look to do is invest in people like the people I'm sitting here with that are able to recruit and retain phenomenal talent. I've only been in the venture. I've been in the venture side. I haven't had an operational role. But I have been doing this for over 10 years now. So I guess it's good from a pattern recognition and seeing a lot of things that have worked and a lot of things that haven't worked. I've only been at Mayfield Fund for about 6 months. Prior to that, I was at Draper Fisher Jurvetson, early stage venture fund, where I was involved in Mike's company, Aruba.
3 times.
And the reason that what I love to do, I have some hobbies, but for the most part, it's work. I love my job, and I largely love it because I get to work with people like Mike, who are extremely passionate. And sometimes they're passionate and love me, and sometimes they're passionate and hate me, but they're always passionate about what they do, and that's what it is to be an entrepreneur. And I get to learn and get exposed to great ideas and great people.
And Emily has a bachelor's degree from Stanford University and an MBA from the Graduate School of Business.
I am a double dipper. And
Double dipper.
I came out here, and like everyone, if you're here, you realize you fall in love and you have to pay ridiculous real estate prices to stay. But
So Brian has a checkered background, having been
Little do you
having lived in a number of countries, and I don't know why you were expelled from them all, but you came back here and graduated from the University of Florida and then the Stanford GSB, and I was obviously just kidding. A really interesting career, and has just started a company recently. And tell us a little bit about the company as well as your other things you've done.
Absolutely. So actually a classmate of Emily's, so graduated from the GSB 5 years ago, and prior to the GSB was an investor, and loved what I was doing, but decided that it was time to do something different and follow in the footsteps that I think many of you guys are considering or have already taken the entrepreneurial plunge and said, I want to be an entrepreneur. So coming out of the GSB, took the entrepreneurial plunge and started a company 4 years ago now in the HR software and services space, actually with a fellow classmate of mine. And it's fun. It's hard. There's lots of when they say that the peaks are lower and the peaks are higher and the valleys are lower. It's definitely true, but it's an incredibly fulfilling experience. I mean, right now I'm really exhausted because I've spent the whole day jackhammering, and not because that's related to HR or software or services, but today was our community service event, and to see 15 people working on Habitat for Humanity, building a house, and everybody kind of having that camaraderie. These are all individuals that didn't know each other, 4 years ago. It's tremendously valuable. So I commend you. Kudos to all of you for being here and for thinking about or already taking the entrepreneurial plunge.
Thank you. So Matt Klickman is undergraduate at Amherst, right?
Yep.
And Graduate School of Business. He has started 2 companies. Is that right?
Yep.
And he's heavily involved in the second company, Merced Systems now. So tell us a little bit about Merced and then some of the other things you've been doing.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll back up, and I graduated here in '93, the Linda Wells class. And my partner, who I've started 2 companies with, Mark Selko, also started that year. That was the olden days, so I went off and worked for a few years and got some really good experience at Intuit, actually. Then started a baby center, which is
Well, and you actually ran a product.
yeah, it was
Intuit, right?
Yeah, the Quicken product, which
Right.
is kind of what got me grounded in product and
Right.
marketing. Which, if in your technology, I think being a product manager is a great microcosm of what it's like to be a CEO and whether you want to start or run a company. I started Baby Center with Mark in 1996. It's still the leading destination for new and expectant parents on the internet. It's now a division of Johnson & Johnson. And then we started a company, Merced Systems, in a totally different area. Went from consumer internet to enterprise software, and now we sell software to large companies to help them run their sales and service operations. We started originally in the call center, providing performance management, which is about just gathering the metrics and driving performance and coaching for frontline call center agents and their supervisors. And now we serve any customer-facing function and do not only metrics and coaching, but also incentives. So if you ever call your wireless company, most likely they're tracked, their sales or service people are tracked by Merced products if you go to the bank or other things like that. And I guess I'm feeling aged as an entrepreneur in that it's been, there really are the entrepreneurial phases, which for Baby Center was probably the first year of what we did, and then I was there a total of 3.5 years. And now Merced I've been at for almost 9 years, and have gone from little company to now 200 people. We did an acquisition and have a significant operation in Europe. And my day today was different than normal in that I was walking the streets of Palo Alto interviewing people, asking them what performance management was, because no one really knows what it is. And because we're having our upcoming customer meeting, and just wanted to add a little bit of levity to the situation.
You're being taped while you're doing this?
We were literally walking around with cameras.
Like
and
Jay Leno style?
Yeah.
Jay Leno was basically jaywalking, and it's great to see the reaction. And then it being Palo Alto, the number of people who said, "I'm starting a company like that," and handed us business cards. And it was someone should have been filming us, because it was really like a reality show of Palo Alto.
One thing you can tell from these individuals who are engaged in entrepreneurial activities is they don't let a lot of grass grow under their feet. They're busy people, and we're very fortunate to have them here, so please welcome our panel. And I want to just say that what Mike told me was the only reason he's here is because of Linda Wells, and that's the only reason the rest of you are here too. Linda, with the help of Nancy Gross, put this on, and she's the reason why we're having them all here today. So Linda and Nancy, thank you. So we're going to go through some questions here, and we're going to try to leave plenty of time for you to ask questions of the panel. But I'd like to start panel with how do you go about finding individuals, and then we'll talk about how you recruit them. But let's start with you've started a company, and now you've got to populate it with some individuals. Maybe you have a partner, but you're now at the point where you need to hire some people. Where do you find them? Where do you go to find them? And let's start with Emily.
Yeah, so I don't have to find them because I'm not the one starting the company, but it is interesting stepping back. It's one of the most critical things that we look at for an entrepreneur is their ability to recruit and retain talent, because no one can do it alone. And so anytime we're looking at an opportunity on whether or not we want to invest in the opportunity, we like to see the kinds of people that entrepreneur can surround him or herself with. And a lot of times what is a really good indication is if someone that they've worked with before in the past wants to come and work with them, or someone that we know in our network, we introduce them to, and they get so enthusiastic about the idea of working with that person that they're willing to join them. So, for instance, I can use Mike as an example. And we were looking at Ruba. One of the first hires he made was a business school classmate of mine who I had enormous amounts of respect for. And I already thought highly of Mike. We were going to give Mike money because he'd made us money in the past. But the quality that he has is that he's able to bring in extremely intelligent and smart people who have lots of opportunities and convince them to join something when it's literally just a concept, slides, just sitting around the table and talking about it. And that kind of passion and enthusiasm is really important, especially in the early days of the company, and bringing those kinds of people in the ecosystem. So we like to help to make the introductions, but we actually look to the entrepreneur to be able to bring that kind of talent and those kind of people around them.
So start with people you know, you've worked with, or your classmates, so you not only have a pool of people there, but you have some credibility with them. And as a venture capitalist, one of the things you look at is whether they're able to attract those people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, I think that the ability to hire talent, and it's not from an investment perspective. It serves to your ability to hire people, to be able to attract investments, to be able to sell early customers when you don't have something. It's all kind of a similar skill set that you really look for in someone who's starting a business.
So Brian, you do some of this for a living, but where do you find people? We'll come back and talk a little bit about how you recruit them in a minute.
Yeah, so definitely when you think about hiring, the way we think about it is you need to identify them, you need to interview them, and then you need to get them to accept the offer. And by far, identifying them and finding them is the most critical aspect, because you don't want to interview people that don't fit. You just want to interview the right individuals. And when we think about identifying them and where to find them, it's important to have some preparation. So, have a process. What are you looking for? Define what a good candidate for that role is. There's tools that, and try to kind of make this practical for people, there's tools called like an ATS, which is an applicant tracking system, that you can use to help you filter all these different resumes and post jobs in different places. There's one that's called jobscore.com, which is free, highly recommend it, and can kind of simplify that process for you. There's other things that we do internally in terms of kind of benchmarking each role, and then using skills tests to do that match. So this is before you even talk to this individual. We use a firm called McQuaig, and it basically allows us to benchmark each role, whether it's a sales role is very different from somebody in finance and accounting. So that way we actually have individuals take these tests before we even speak to them.
So what was that name again?
McQuaig, sorry, it's McQuaig is the name of the benchmark. And again, you tailor it based on kind of the different roles. I would definitely echo what Emily said is maximize referrals. Referrals can get you to probably to 10 to 20 individuals. After that, you're definitely kind of in the open pool, but maximize that as much as possible. And the last thing that I'd say in terms kind of identifying them is you use phone screens intelligence, kind of a low-cost way to talk to a lot of people, especially to talk through kind of deal-breaker questions. You know, can this person communicate? It's a role that this is somebody who can be talking to clients. You want to make sure that they have kind of strong communication skills. Is this person willing to relocate? If you're here in the Bay Area and there's somebody you're talking to that's not in the Bay Area, that might be something that very quickly you realize that this is somebody that I shouldn't even be spending any time on. So in the early days, like identifying those and using objective measures such as skills test and actually some of these tools that are free out there can facilitate that process dramatically.
So Matt, you've done 2 companies, and so any difference between the way in which you went after getting, finding the people for Baby Center than for Merced Systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main difference is what Emily had on. The second time around, you have a track record. You've worked with people, so our initial team was a team we worked with in the past, which helps in a lot of ways. Because really, just as important as finding people is, there's a pretty high failure rate of a lot of the early employees you get. So, it lowers the risk. Not only is it easier to attract them, but you have a higher, degree of confidence that they're going to succeed. So, definitely having that, network helps the second time. But I think the similarity both times is there's a lot of other positions you need. You're not going to get them all from people in the past. So as we started both of our companies, we hadn't been in those industries before, and we were just big networkers, met a lot of people and read, and that network is just really the way that you find people, and then you eventually, kind of woo someone to join you. And it really is usually the second or third order people that you meet, that it's, you talk to a classmate and then they tell you about someone. And pretty soon if you develop, if you are aggressively networking in an area you're looking to go after, you'll start to be able to, one, find good people who are interested, and 2, calibrate without having known them. When a name comes, if you're starting a travel company and a name comes up 3 times in a row that you've heard, then you have a pretty good idea that they're good. And then the last thing I'd say is you really are selling yourself more than the idea, because there's so many early stage ideas out there. Most of them are not going to work. Most of them aren't understandable. So you're going to get a lot of no's, and you have to realize that it really is, they're ultimately going to be joining with you. So you've got to sell them on not only the idea, but just, that you're the right person to lead the company and tackle the opportunity.
Mike, any difference in your 4 companies and where you found the people?
I look for people a lot of places. I look for super strong competitors. The woman, and Emily mentioned Angela, she almost made the Canadian Women's Olympic Marathon team. She'd never been a product manager before, but I think someone who's an almost Olympic marathoner and a GSB student is like automatic hire for me. Also, this guy I never worked with, but he played Ultimate Frisbee. His name was Greg Fay. The way he played Ultimate Frisbee, you just knew he'd be a monster, and he was amazing person at Direct Hit. I always keep an Excel spreadsheet, and whenever I meet someone really cool, I add them to that spreadsheet, like someone I might want to hire someday. And I have a Rolodex, Outlook context, whatever, 5,000 people. There was a study that said, what are these traits of successful entrepreneurs? And we tried to cross-reference everything, second child, third child, father worked for the government, whatever. And they only found 2 things. One was they take their chairs with them when they move from company to the other, one company to another one. And the other is they form relationships when there's no apparent need. Like they find some orthodontist somewhere and they build a relationship with or someone. And those people end up turning to be useful, later on. And I also go for people like these, who can play multiple roles and can go on to be successful, very high-powered people. X-Fire, I think 9 out of the first 15 people went on to become CEOs or general manager of their own company. So.
Okay, good. So that's sort of how you go about it, finding them. Now, Matt started a little bit on how you recruit them by basically selling them. But Matt, so anything else that you want to say about how you actually acquire them, can recruit them and get them to join the company?
Yeah, so I think particularly in the early days, again, because it's unformed, it takes a lot more time, so you really have to be persistent in communicating with them and trying to get other people to build bridges to them. It's just, it's not as known an entity that they're joining, so you've got to work a lot harder and longer. And the other thing that I noticed just over time, and I'm not sure whether this is a good window or a bad window, is where you are in the economic cycle matters a lot. That, you know, when times are really booming, it's just hard to get people's attention. It's hard to find good people. So the selection gets much easier when the economy's a little bit tight, because you can screen people for, you know, you can give them tests, for example. When the economy's good, you can't do that. And it's not like the tests will show you what the person can do, but it's just a good screening mechanism, because you're looking for very few people actually have the show the ability to go beyond the initial step on something, to take, you know, to do a little bit of extra work. So I found if you're in an environment where the person has to go the extra mile, you either give them a test or you just ask them, hey, go check out this company's website and tell me what you think. It's nice to have that. It's nice to have a world where that exists. It saves you a lot of time. And I don't know today whether I think the economy is tough in some ways, but I think in Silicon Valley it's kind of getting a little bit bubbly again. So recruiting, unfortunately, is probably getting harder as we speak right now.
So Brian, what about you? So now you've identified them. So what are the things you do to try to recruit them? This is remember, we're thinking about sort of the early hires here.
So definitely kind of the mix of evaluation versus selling them. Completely agree with Matt. You need to be selling them from the very first time you meet with them. So now you've identified it's a good fit, you know, met all the benchmarks and whatnot. And usually the way that we think about it is about half your time in that first interview should be selling your vision, selling you the company, and then half the time evaluating. And that mix actually gets more to the sales side as that person kind of gets further along. There are other things that we do in terms of making sure that the person really is excited about joining. And there's ways that you can make it very personal. And I think Matt kind of said that, kind of those bridges. So some of the things that we've done is in the offer letter, we'll say, listen, we want you and we'll mention that person's by name, that spouse, that girlfriend, that boyfriend, whoever the person is, saying we want to invite you and that person out to dinner. And making sure that that person's name was kind of explicit in the offer letter really makes that personal connection. With all of our probably first 15 hires, what we also said is the first week on the job, your responsibilities are to work out, sleep in, relax. You don't have to do anything. You're on the payroll. It doesn't count against PTO. The only condition is that you can't take any voicemails, phone calls, emails, text messages from your previous employer. But the first week is for you to relax. And you're like, wow, that's crazy. That's amazing. Like, what kind of company does that? It's like, we want you to be really excited about joining Algentis. And the way that we think about it is that at that point in time, that person doesn't know anything. And the cost is so low, and it definitely sends a message, which is true, is that we care about our employees. We want them to be kind of refreshed. And it came from a former boss of mine who many years ago said, when you're in between jobs is the only time that you can really relax. And most people don't have that luxury to be able to take 3 months off and go travel. We can't afford to pay them for 3 months, but we say, hey, we can do it for a week. We also do things like have the entire team send that person an email. Say, listen, it was great meeting you. We're excited about kind of the prospects of you joining kind of the team. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. And again, it's just you are recruiting that person and you want to make that person feel special. And I feel fortunate to say that in our case, we've been able to hire our top candidate every single time. And I attribute a lot of it to that selling and those kind of personal bridges.
So when you say selling, you said you need to have a vision. But give us an example of the kind of thing that you think is important for these people to project in the sales process.
So
Because even this is a company that doesn't exist, may not even have its first round funding yet.
But if you've hopefully you've gotten an investor pitch down, right? That pitch that you use with investors is actually be very, very similar to what you use with your early employees. The other thing that having these multiple rounds of interviews and really getting to know that person as an individual, you'll hopefully understand what the person's currency is and what matters to them. So for one individual, what's their career path, and that's what may matter. Or for another person, it might be title. In the early days, titles are pretty cheap, right? So if they care about being a VP or director, do that. So it's understanding what matters to them, but treating them as Emily mentioned, you can't do it by yourself. And it's really important that if you've identified somebody as a top candidate, that you figure out what are some of the general things, i.e. almost talking to an investor, and what are some of the personal things to that specific individual.
Good. Emily, so you've seen this from the other side. And And at least I know at Draper Fisher, and I'm sure at Mayfield, you're gonna have entrepreneurs coming to you and say, help, we need help. That's why that's why we picked you as to be on our board instead of somebody else. So open your Rolodex, identify some people and help us. So how do you do that? First, is that an appropriate thing for someone to ask you?
Yep,
I'm sure
absolutely.
they do. And then how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, I think that being people routers is one of the most important roles of a venture capitalist. And I mean, like Kleiner Perkins, which is one of the well-known venture capital firms that's had extreme success over a number of years, has I think it's 3 full-time recruiters that are on staff at all times just to help them and their companies keep track of all the people flow. So I view it as a critical thing for me is to have a network of people that can be helpful both from an advisory perspective, people who are industry experts, but also people who may be open to joining a new venture. So that's one side. There's kind of the sourcing side, and that's one of the roles that we play. And then the other one is on the closing side, which is usually coming in at the end, and that's kind of a way of showing the support. Usually it's the same way that you're saying that investor deck. Why you're doing this? For me, it's like, here's why I invested. Here's what got me excited. Here's how I'm thinking about it. And what I appreciate is I get to make a couple of investments, right? 2, 3 a year. You make one choice, as an employee, and that's the most important investment that you can possibly make. You're spending that time, spending away from your family, it's your livelihood. And so, I look at it and say, here's how I invested, and you need to have your own parameters, but hopefully this helps you make the best investment that you're going to make, because I'm only going to make money if you make a lot of money. So our incentives are aligned. I think that one other thing that I would kind of step back is that people sometimes can get very functionally excited about getting the most important person for that role. So you're an online shoe company, so you want to get someone from Zappos who did online shoes. That's not necessarily a good example because those guys are great, but you've done payments, and so you want to get somebody who's built this kind of payment platform. Sometimes the functional is very important, but making sure that chemistry is there is more important than the person with the perfect resume. And I've seen this a couple of times where you get what you think is the perfect person on paper and the investors are telling you, but the personal chemistry isn't there, and then you don't build the kind of culture that allows you to bring in additional talent. And those first hires, while you want to get the best talent that you can for your business, you also want to make sure you're spending more time with this person than you're spending with your wife or your husband or your children. So you have to have that ability to build a company together and build a relationship. So those first couple of hires, I really think the bar is just very high, that there's also a chemistry component there that isn't just based off of the functional need.
So
I think it's more important not hire functionally because, and Mike, I'd be curious, you probably having built multiple companies, I think you hire for the natural athlete like 10 times out of 10 for the first, 30 employees or so. So, and there are a lot of venture funds, maybe you guys are different, that will push that, oh, you've got to find this person who did this before. And when you're an early stage company, you're purposely breaking some rule that's out there, and you need to bring incredible energy. You've got to walk through walls. So it's pretty hard to find that in someone who has a lot of experience, because obviously there's exceptions to that, but generally they've gotten comfortable, they've gotten set in their ways a little bit, and you need to wear multiple hats inside a company. So I just simplify it as you're almost always looking for the athlete over the experience.
So let me just expand on what Emily just said. And my guess is that not everybody out here is going to be funded by a VC. So if you're not funded by a VC, are there any substitutes for the Rolodex and the help, the VC, that you could find to help you with the identification and the sale?
Yeah, I think that, stepping back, I think there's also a lot of versions of capital right now. I think what venture investors, is hard for me to compete in some ways because there are so many angel funds or so many wealthy individuals that are investing, people who want to take advisory roles. So you can get an ecosystem that maybe isn't a traditional venture fund, but it's money from a well-connected angel or someone, an advisor that you really respect, who can also help you to recruit those talent. I also think if you're a company that's servicing a specific, I've seen this work, servicing a specific company, or you have a couple of customers, your customers can actually be very helpful pointing out the talent, the kinds of people that they want to work with or that they've had successful relationships with. You should listen to that. Like the people that they say are rock stars, either within the organization or other that have serviced them, those could be really good hires for you. So if one company that I was involved with, they sold to the guy and they loved working with him, and everybody underneath him and the CEO also really respected this guy's opinion, and they ultimately brought him on, and he was able to repeat that sale across multiple similar e-commerce companies. It was one of the best hires they made. And so sometimes don't always think about it as like a separate hire. You can also look to your ecosystem for talent.
So Mike, coming to you, it's obviously different for you in your fourth company than your first company because you have the credibility of having started 3 other companies. So let's go back to your first company, all right? When you hadn't done this before, you were fresh out of the Harvard Business School, and you were trying to do something that you'd never done before. So how did you convince people to join you then?
So I think 11 out of the first 15 people at my first company, Stylist, were people I knew. Most of them I had worked with. I believe, I can't remember if it was Matt or Brian who said product management is a great source of people. 3 of the first hires at Stylist were product managers, and it was.
They were before they came, or when you?
They were before they came. They were product managers at a
Okay.
software company.
Okay.
And they got a career progression. One of them became a vice president of marketing, one of them became a vice president of engineering, and one of them became a vice president of sales. So talk about, titles are cheap. But one of the nice benefits of that is product managers are already used to dealing with all the, marketing hates engineering, engineering hates sales, whatever, all that crap that goes on. So when they were in their individual, silos, they were much less tendent to fight amongst themselves.
Mhm.
But even at sort of first days, I agree with some of the other comments, Brian's comment about the dinner thing. For senior hires, I have them over to dinner at my house, and I try to do everything same day close. So people come in, do reference checks while they're interviewing with people, if it's going well, and give them an offer while they're still there, and say, are you ready to accept? And usually they say, whoa, it was just kind of fast, and you say, okay, I don't want to rush you. Go home and sleep on it, let me know tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. But a lot of times, no, it's great because that sort of sets the tone, the momentum, the pace. And I also agree with the other comments about being all over people when you give them an offer, just all over them. I mean, send flowers or some other gift to them or their spouse, same day delivery. And also never give up on people. One of our best hires ever at Xfire is someone who turned me down and said, no, I'm not gonna do it. So I called him back the next day, I said, I bet you're probably, after you turned it down, you probably had second thoughts, and I bet you're thinking you might have wished you changed your mind. I said, yeah, you're right. So he came, and it was great.
I've seen the flowers to the wife, so chocolate to the wife. I have seen a couple people that really do the family recruitment well, because it is a family decision. And if you isolate it and just think it's the individual, you're potentially losing half the battle, because they're going home and talking to someone who doesn't care anything about what you're saying. They're just asking what's the salary, what are the guys like. And so for you to actually get another person on your side, even just a little bit, really helps. So I wouldn't underestimate that. I've seen a lot of people use that very well.
Yeah, and I'll echo the same thing. Personal, all over people understand who they are, because that's how you're competing, and to some extent they're buying into something where they're going to work hard, so you want to see that their whole life is incorporated. And in terms of being persistent, I agree. Like, sometimes we waited 2 years for someone. That's a little bit long, but people turn you down. They go to another job. Sometimes it's 3 months. We haven't been as lucky to have it be one day like you did. But I had we were a little bit bigger when we were hiring our CFO at the second company. His wife interviewed me, that he was all set to join, and he said, my wife's an organizational behavior person, and she's done, and part of our performance management's about, how to changing people's behavior, and she had some other connection. So it's kind of like, because we were still pretty unformed at the time, and I was like, well, send her in, and even around the office, people are like, wow, I can't believe his wife's coming in, and she interviewed me and liked what we were doing, and obviously we know who made the decisions in the family.
I thought you were going to say, so you hired her. So Well, good. Anything more do you want to add on this whole issue of, so how do you go about selling yourself when you don't have a lot to sell other than yourself? And it's an idea and a vision, and trying to get that credibility. But part of what I heard you say was use the investor pitch, and if you've got investors, whether it's a venture firm or other investors, an angel, they can certainly be a source of credibility for you. Sometimes I've heard people talk about trying to find what sometimes they call a river guide. That is in some industries, if you're in a vertical, there are people there who have been there for a long time, And they know not only about the industry, what it's like, but they also know a lot of people in the industry. And it turns out that, at least my experience is, that people who are like that and maybe close to retirement love to tell you what they know. You can't believe what they'll tell you. And so don't hesitate to ask. Well, so let's move on now to later stage, right? One of the things that often people ask about is, well, what about hiring a headhunter? What about hiring somebody who can actually try to go out and search for you and find people for you? That would obviously be for a specific role, like a CFO or something where you were looking for specific talent. Any of you use them? If not, why? Or how would you go about this later stage? So let's start with Mike.
Yeah, I have used headhunters. Generally not my first choice. I have had some good luck. One of our key people at Xfire came from a headhunter. I think it's really important that the pace and the energy or whatever of the headhunter is the same as yours, because if they're not, then you're just going to be all this friction. And also think it's important that it's really 100% pay for success, because sometimes even at the higher levels they say, okay, well, the retainer is $50,000, whether or not we find someone or not, and I just think, whoa. So definitely try to put them on only for success.
Emily.
Yeah, I think that there's also different kinds of recruiters. When you're hiring executive talent, I think that the value, they do sometimes bring candidates to the table. What I've been surprised by is that usually we end up settling as a board for a senior executive or a CEO on someone that we actually know, or you think to, you just didn't know they were in market. Or they helped actually create a process around it where everyone got comfortable that was the right person to actually do. So I do think that they do help, add process, that especially if it's complex and you have a lot of board members, to help get everybody on the same page. And also you can, as an executive in another company, you're going to talk to a headhunter without it necessarily seeming bad, whereas if you come and start having lunch with me and talking to me about other companies, your existing employers are going to be like, what are you doing? So it gives kind of a shield, I think, for them to be able to have some conversation. So for the right kinds of levels, I think that they can be very helpful from a process perspective. From a more junior employee, we've seen in-house recruiters that some companies have worked in. Also, employee referral programs tend to work pretty well. Not forever, but in that 20 to kind of 60, 20 to 70, we've seen a number of our companies, those have been the best hires. And there's actually been studies that have been shown that someone who comes in through a referral is, because they know the culture, they've heard their friends complain about their boss or know about their boss, so they're much more likely to actually be a good fit and are much more likely to stay long term and work out. So the extent to which you hire right the first time, those can help you also bring it. It's not going to fit all, but that definitely is a gold mine. You should really figure out the right ways to create incentives so your employees are wanting to refer in additional employees.
So Brian, in your HR service practice, do you recommend that people hire headhunters?
No.
Why not, and what do you recommend they do?
I think it's, like Mike said, Mike's like, well, if the headhunter is going to speak with the same amount of passion, then it can work. And they're not, right? It's you're the one who decided to quit your job and leave things behind to kind of start this company. And especially, maybe later stage, and I think I agree, there's certain cases where you have so many responsibilities that you can't be as involved with some of those key hires. But I think for quite a while, one of your core responsibilities as the founder of this company is to recruit and to find that talent. And it's your responsibility to do so. And I think everybody always says, oh, can you do our recruiting? Can you handle it? Because it takes a long time. It's not perfect. You're going to make some hiring mistakes. But I think it's very core to your responsibility in the company.
So Matt, how much time did you spend in the first 6 months of each of your companies focusing on hiring as opposed to building your product and your...
Truthfully, it's hard to tell because everything's a blur, how you're doing it, so you really don't separate it. I think that's the nature of it. But I'm sure it was 30-40% of my time. thing I'd say back on the using a headhunter to me is when you move out of the entrepreneurial stage and into the mature stage. We were we were allergic to headhunters partly because we were cheap and we didn't want to spend the money, but partly because it was just that you're not, particularly for earlier stage companies, and I think you definitely find people that are benefits around some people who aren't looking will opt in, but if you're willing to put the energy, you can find those people. You got to learn how to approach them, not as I'm trying to recruit you, but hey, do you know people? And so I think you just get to the right caliber of person. You don't have that filter of recruiter. So we didn't use them at all. In fact, once we started hiring some executives and they defaulted to recruiters, the two founders, we were both saying, like, just pick up the phone and call people and make it happen. And I think at first we gave in too early. Now we use them, and we actually use them pretty successfully. But particularly, most of my recruiting was done prior to LinkedIn. And with LinkedIn out there, it doesn't matter what you're going to go search for. If you're, professional services, I'd never dealt with that before. Like recruiting now for professional services, I'd find 50 companies, that had professional services, and on LinkedIn, I'd have those names. And again, I think people underestimate the ability of, it definitely works when people are older, but even when they're younger, just call up people. Don't try and recruit them. Just say, hey, I need to learn about professional services.
Right.
We're building a team in that area. And so again, long way of saying, I think it was several years in before we used recruiters, and I think most companies are more successful that way now.
It's I think probably not done too often, but one of the things that people often say is they have so many things that they're doing when they're trying to start the company that they need something to focus their attention on a particular hire. Let's say you need a VP of sales or a VP of marketing. And I've actually seen where a VC on the board has said, we're going to hire a headhunter. We're going to outsource this to take it off your plate. But the sub-message was, this is pretty important, and if we don't get somebody there to start moving the process along, we may not get there as soon as we should. So, I think that all these comments you heard are very useful and things you ought to think about. Let's turn now to the question about benchmarking salaries and stock options and things like that. And so Brian, how do you do that? Where do you go to find what you ought to pay a person at an early stage firm, and both in terms of salary and in terms of the kinds of ownership?
Yeah, so it's a tough question. I think there's a lot of sites out there that you can, some are free, some you can pay for, that like salary.com, that I would use as kind of just for order of magnitude, kind of where things are. Keep in mind that those are averages, so that it's tough to use that, but at least it'll start you off in the right direction. Then I think a lot of it has to come to, we've kind of touched on this, but the idea of kind of hiring slowly and firing quickly is making sure that if you especially are very good about the firing quickly, then you don't have to worry that much about are you overpaying somebody? Because if the person's not working, then you'll get them out of the business, and whatever equity plan, you'll put a 1-year cliff, so you'll make a decision before that, so it won't affect things as much. We're big fans of telling our clients that, listen, is this person the ideal person for your business? This is your hire number 2, number 3, and they want $5,000 more dollars or $10,000 more dollars. Really? Isn't it worth it? So I think that there's things that you can do even in the messaging to make people feel good about the compensation. So you can say, hey, we've decided that the range is going to be, 90 to 110, and we're going to offer you the top of the range, 110. But you pick that range, right? So you can make it whatever you want it to be. And if you just want to make sure that you're setting something in place that person feels good about, that is also in line with your compensation internally. So that's the caveat with going too high, is making sure that always assume that everybody knows everybody's compensation structure and there's some parity there.
Emily.
Yeah, I think that I've seen two different, Well, so in terms of gathering data, I mean, as venture investors, we sit on boards, and so we see it across multiple companies. And at DFJ, we actually kept a spreadsheet across every single one of our investments, and would share that in an aggregated form with the CEOs. So your investors are people who aren't, have exposure to lots of different companies. Should be a good source of that data for you, and you should ask them, and you should ask senior people. In terms of how you actually think about the specifics. If you guys haven't seen it, you can go to DocStock. Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix, has a great presentation on how he thinks about culture and hiring. And there's two different approaches, and I don't think one's right or wrong, but I think it goes to the culture, and you have to be intellectually, you have to be consistent as an organization. His approach is they pay people market. They pay people what he thinks he only hires the best people, and they pay people what they think they can get at another job. But if they don't work out, they're not working out, and he lets them go. And they're very, very transparent about that within the organization. So they're not necessarily trying to get, the cheapest talent they can get. But you have to perform, and every single time, every manager is held to who are the two people that you want to keep, and everyone else, there's they do have turnover in the organization. But again, it's very transparent. I've also seen organizations that CEO sets the standard. The CEO is not paying himself a lot, and the CEO is not, wants to keep have people pay what, the minimum salaries. They compensate them in equity, and they're able to convince them that the equity is worth it. So I think that, you have to figure out, you as the founder, you as the CEO, you set the tone. That's why people take dollar salaries. That's why you see that in the certain organizations. And then you have to be consistent. If you make exceptions, the one-off exception, this is what everyone in the organization is going to do, except for Joe. Joe has to make $250,000. That doesn't work. So whatever path you want, I guess if I take anything, it's be consistent throughout that path.
So Mike.
Yeah, as CEO, I did the low pay thing. I was $50K a year at Stylus and $75K a year at Xfire. I believe in employees taking a pay cut in exchange for equity. And I think if they don't do it, that's kind of a litmus test in itself. And you probably don't want them in the organization, at least for me. Now, the flip side of that is it's worked out great. We made 24 millionaires at DirectHit, and we made 7 millionaires at Xfire, and depending on how you count it, we made some at Rubit too. And I did see Emily's spreadsheet from DFJ, which was very helpful to have these negotiations. You still are saying you're taking a 25% pay cut, but we're giving you, 1.5% of the company, and I think that's a trade-off that we want people who want to make that trade-off in our company.
And one thing to give Mike credit for, he takes a real personal responsibility that his employees, that equity is worth something. And there's a lot of value in that. And I think that people, because sometimes in how you pitch an employee and how you treat equity, because if you start to give it out loosely or give it to advisors, then that also makes them question it. And if you really know that this equity, and you have to believe this equity is going to be valuable, and you treat it as such, and you're consistent around, then the entrepreneurs know, and he has every single one of the employees that he brings on do make money when working with them, and that's something he personally puts as a goal.
Yeah, yes, I just want to echo similarity just on the benchmarking. I basically use like a salary.com, and there's other sources, and that's that's inaccurate, and then you calibrate it with calling people and getting data. So that's and we were too cheap. You're a consistent theme to want to pay for services, but I don't think they were very good anyway. So it wasn't just that. I'll take a different point again that just worked for us personally, which maybe was more like Mike's, and it maybe comes back to what Chuck was saying around that's profiling of companies. That it was actually it's kind of a good exercise to go through. I didn't do it when we started a company, and this is easier second time around. But we were pretty thoughtful about not being expedient, and you obviously always sometimes have to make certain adjustments. But we were really careful and lost some people or delayed getting some people on board that we didn't. We necessarily want someone to take a salary cut, that we'd often go for that angle, but at least wanted them to be modest and have them come in thinking they're making 80 to 90% of what they were going to make. And we were paid the least, so we were able to say, look, we're making half or 1/3 of what we could make. And what happened is once you do that, you do get this beneficial effect that by the time you get to employee 10, 12, 13, they bought into the team when they come in, and they will actually see, okay, look, this offer is 90% of what I had before. Everyone else did that and maybe had less. And then you lay out the track record of what the equity is worth. You lay out the track record of how if you're successful and we grow more quickly, which everyone having modest salaries will do, your salary will go up because you'll be running bigger teams. And that's actually played very well for us. And now we're I mean, essentially, we're always a market organization, but I think you do want to kind of tamp down any of that kind of salary or special discussions. And we also did that, and you can be a little more expedient with this, but around titles, to get back to one of your earlier points. You can think it's cheap to throw in VP titles, but if that person's pretty good, you're setting yourself up for they're probably not going to be a VP when the company's bigger. And you know, it's again, it's choice of what do you do in the short term versus the long term. There's, you know, if you can get people to come in at a lower title and tell them it doesn't really matter, and by the time they leave, they're going to be at a different title, it sets a good foundation for the future. So I do think it's really important for you to think about what you're trying to do with the company, how sustainable you're trying to make it, and how much you're willing to sort of be more patient or sacrifice some things in the short term for what will be long-term gains.
Mark Andreessen has a great, this is a law that I loved how he described it. He calls it the law of crappy people. But he says that if you hire, you know, you get focused and say we're only going to hire the best people at this level. But then someone's on mediocre and you're like, okay, but we just need them, so we're going to hire Joe as a VP. Well then, you know, Frank comes along and you're like, well, he's not as good as everyone else, but he's about the same as Joe. I mean, Joe's a VP, so he could be a VP too. And then you start, so you always end up within the organization kind of optimizing it. You end up finding that the quality of the people is what's the lowest, the lowest performer at that particular title. So I'm actually comfortable giving titles early on to really aggressive people, but you do always want to be very cognizant of that you're held to that standard and they have to continually perform, or else you end up lowering the overall talent they're going to be getting at that level.
I think what's important to note is that I don't think anybody here is saying, oh, the people who get paid more are better than the people who are getting paid less. Quite the opposite. Both. The assumption is that you're hiring the right people and they're high quality individuals. It just you decide which approach you're going to take. And we see for our clients, we have access to all their salary information, and it's shocking to us sometimes when you see the order of magnitude of people at a very similar company getting paid, you know, multiples of what somebody else is. But there's that culture, you know, which approach are you going to take? There's no right or wrong. It's just going to be a personal decision, and it probably is also factored in the type of business. Is this something that there is potential for a Google to acquire it or not? I think that will influence the alternatives that you can choose.
So let's turn to the last question that we had here, and that has to do with sort of the legal, logistical issues that CEOs need to be aware of when they start hiring people. And let's do this quickly so we can leave 15 minutes for questions. But Brian, you spent a lot of your time thinking about this, so you start.
So that's what we do for our clients, right? We offload everything that's administratively associated with having employees, all that we call the sexy part of running a business: payroll, benefits, insurance, and taxes, and all that good stuff. And there's the things that you should be thinking about. There's when it's just yourself and your co-founder, there's a lot of things you can just ignore and just say, hey, what I want to do, I just focus on fundraising, forget all kind of those legal aspects. You're probably not paying yourself any money anyway, so it doesn't really matter. As soon as you start hiring those first employees, whatever path you decide to take, now you need to worry about some of the legal aspects. There's legal aspects that are kind of, you know, in the interview, what you can say, you can't say, so there's things to watch out there, not getting too personal, not violating the at-will kind of law here in California. There's a lot of T's that need to be crossed and I's that need to be dotted. There are firms like Algentis that's what we do. We'll set you up and kind of you don't have to worry about that. I would say that especially in this economic environment, tax authorities both at the federal, state, and local level are looking for more tax revenue, and we're seeing a lot of our clients getting hit. Prior to starting with us, getting hit, and that's actually why they come on board. So there's some basic items as you start a company that your corporate attorney won't know about. So it's important to either reach out to resources like the CES or fellow entrepreneurs, or to firms like ours that can kind of guide you to what are some of the mandatory insurance or tax filings or registrations that you need to put in place. And I don't know if I assume you don't want to go into all the detail.
So let me just ask a question. So if I was starting a company and I came to you and I wanted to sell you on the fact that you ought to give me a discount, is this something I should do, could do?
So you should always, if you're an entrepreneur, you should always ask for a discount, right? No matter what you're doing.
From Brian.
Yeah, you can ask for us. Actually, one of the things, one of our value propositions or our commitment to our clients, rather, is that we don't believe in price discrimination. So the fee schedule that we have in place today, 100% of our clients are on. And regardless of whether you're backed by Mayfield or you're bootstrapped, I have one very close friend of mine who's a GSB classmate was at my wedding. I was at his wedding. I babysit his kid all the time, and he to this day still can't believe that I didn't give him a discount. So
Tough, don't spend the time.
with me, maybe not, but I always ask for discounts, always.
So Matt, from the point of view of CEO, so what are the 3 things you think are most important for people to
Yeah, I think it, I would, advertisement for Brian's firm, I didn't use it, it didn't exist, but we used TriNet, and you gotta find a good one, but I do think it's shocking how much administrative stuff there is, and, pitfalls tax-wise and payroll-wise and hassles, and how uncovered that is. It's one of the things that I struggled with, and I had kind of a background, I had been a CFO of a, kind of a startup nonprofit before that, so I dealt in that world. So I think it's good to find a firm like that, because it's just good to offload all of that stuff and not get surprised. Secondly, I think if you're careful, and maybe we were just lucky, a lot of the early employees you're recruiting, if you're careful about it, you do have less problems for the first 20 or 30 employees, just because you're more carefully selecting people, and that's one reason to do that. Third thing, though, is to keep guys like this in check, and also, make sure that quality control is there. You should get a little bit smart about, you can't just take the word for what they say, because those organizations tend to be, not know your business as well, and tend to be more conservative. So I would learn a little bit, like put a little bit extra effort into just learning the basic dynamics of, what can you get sued for, what are some of the dynamics, and once you and then you think you're pretty covered there. And then the second thing is firing is really hard, and that's where most of the messiness comes in. So make sure you have someone, I happen to be pretty experienced at it, unfortunately, before we came in, so I felt comfortable with that, but I watched a lot of the other people we had who didn't have that experience, and I think here's an area you should be expedient, is make sure you have someone, if you don't, who understands how to deal with all the logistics, or not logistics, like just the dynamics of it, and has been through it, and make sure they get involved before the problem situation starts, because they'll figure out how to humanely get someone out of the organization and prevent a lawsuit.
I mean, Matt's point is spot on. We see it across our clients that around the 20 employee mark is when weird things start to happen. And my hypothesis is that you've kind of exhausted the people the people that know, and now you're into kind of people that came in through Craigslist. But I mean, without exception, 100% of our client base were breaking the law before they came on board, and it's just overwhelming. It's just too much, especially in California, which is widely considered the most employee-friendly state in the country.
So Mike, what are the 2 things you think are most important for the CEO to focus on?
In legal issues around hiring?
Yeah, or just generally about issues you need to be concerned about, issues on hiring, legal or others.
Well, so I wouldn't put legal in the top 2. I am painfully familiar with all the things that can go wrong, and they do. We've had firings in my company. We've had firings, and then in the process of acquisition, the acquirer said we want 100% stockholders to approve the deal. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, we give equity to everyone. That means one of the people we fired. I even give equity to people we fire. They needed to vote yes on this deal. So all these things you got to be careful about. And they always do vote yes, but it's like a little scary. Yeah, and absolutely about breaking the law. Is this on tape? I'm sure all my companies have broken the law at one point or the other through. Yeah, I haven't signed that yet. So yeah, it's getting advice on this stuff is really important. It's a very litigious world we live in, which I think stinks. Especially if you start to make money, then people come up with ways to come after you. So, but I try to make it. What do I say? I want anyone who ever done a deal with me to want to do another deal with me, whether it's an employee, an investor, business partner, or whatever. So I try to leave no time bombs out there, which ends up helping with a lot of these legal issues.
So Emily,
Even people I fired.
do you recommend that your firms go to someone like Brian? And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially for a small company, the overhead and the expertise you need, it's not worth your time. I do think that you can't build a business based off of fear. You can't be afraid around people suing you, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to accidentally do it. And I think that the most important thing is to handle yourself with integrity and act in a way where everyone's going to do it. But having the back end systems to help you is very important. The biggest issues are we've seen people make mistakes on the front loading, and usually those can be resolved. I think where things get really ugly, and you kind of hear this is in the firing, and especially when you have people who aren't sophisticated at firing and don't know, you know, I can think of a number of cases that I've been involved in. It's just little things that were said, and, you know, just trying to make them feel better, or like, you know, things that you thought you were maybe making an agreement to that you weren't allowed to make an agreement to. Those things always come back, and that's where if it's litigious, it becomes so ugly. So at a minimum, have someone else in the room with you. I mean, that's what I'll just say, at a minimum. But make sure that you talk to, if you're ever going through a process of firing, make sure to talk to a lawyer and understand what you can and can't say, and to even walk through it maybe with a mentor who's done it before, because those are usually some of the post-20 ugly situations, is those first couple of firings where you end up making some substantial mistakes.
Good. Well, thank you for that. Now let's open it up for questions. Karen.
So Socrates famously said that, you know, the only thing I know is that I know nothing, and after our morning session, I definitely walked away like feeling very Socratic. So thank you for that. So I guess my question is,
It's a backhanded compliment.
no, I mean, as someone who doesn't actually have an MBA, thank you for that, because it was very helpful. And so, to that extent, how do you know what you don't know? Which is to say, how do you know what skills you need if you don't see them? And the corollary, I guess, is how do you know when you need them when you're in your early phases?
Who wants to start?
Well, just a quick one. I mean, so my first company, we started with $1,500. I put in $500. Each of my two partners put in $500. We didn't know anything. I mean, and we just said, okay, what's the product we want to make? How are we going to distribute it, and how much should we charge? And I think just common sense. So don't get too stressed out about all the stuff you learn in fancy business schools and everything. Sorry. Just start, and common sense will lead you the right way.
In terms of staffing, I mean,
Everything.
specifically for staffing.
Staffing, you know, hire great people who want to do great things and you want to work with. I mean, we talk about all these things, but, you know, just think about from a logical standpoint. Do you want a hard worker or not hard worker? Hard worker. Do you want someone energetic or not energetic? Do you want someone honest or not honest? Really?
I think where the don't know comes in is usually around when you have to break something out into a function, because early on it's just hire smart people and everything gets done. And so I think it's just, you know, you got to be humble, and you've got to network, and you got to listen. And then when you do that, you'll start hearing the patterns, like, oh, like I mentioned, professional services. Gosh, that's actually a separate discipline, and we're a size now. We need to, you know, split that out. If you, you know, you can rely on others to, if you're receptive to the data, to point to, you know, when there's, you know, even if you've never experienced that before, and that's an area you know when you've got to do something new.
Jan.
For the first hire, this person is very important that you sort of cannot do, or you really need this first hire for your company. But how much do you, in terms of pay, like what kind of a percentage of cut from this person must be very capable, so they have to take a sort of, since you're a startup, this person will take a pay cut. What kind of a percentage pay cut normally? And also you will give this person equity. Like how much equity do you think about how much this equity will be worth in 2 years or 3 years, or you don't?
How do you think about this?
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
I think on the salary, it really starts with you got to know the person, because, you know, a lot of people need, you know, if they have a family and they haven't made money somewhere else, they may not be able to take as much of a pay cut, and if you can't afford them, then you can't. But so, you know, I think it's generally, you know, you want people to take some step down, just to show that they're committed. If they want to go to $1, I think that's really, you know, more based on, you only want them to do that if they're savvy and they're, you know, they have money in the bank, they, you know, don't have many expenses, and they're really, you know, going for it. So I think the salary is easier. The equity is the hardest one. I think there's no, that just is common sense. Common sense and a little bit of networking, because, you know, you're hiring someone, are they your co-founder and they're, you know, 49%, or are they your first, you know, employee at 1%? Like, it really depends. You know, you got to actually think through it multiple different ways and talk with them. And have you come up with a model? And then, I mean, to me, the best way is actually create a bunch of frameworks. Make sure you create them first, so that you don't end up in something where it's at 49% when that's not what you want. But create a bunch of frameworks, like, you know, are they a co-founder, are they not? What could this be worth? And once you have a framework that makes sense, or a couple of them that calibrate, like ending value framework or, peer comparable framework, then begin to talk to them in frameworks, because it's the only way you're gonna get to, on a fuzzy thing like that, to an outcome where they would go, okay, yeah, I get how you're thinking, and, then usually the right answer you get to a zone, and then it's just, negotiation from that point.
I'd also think about who are the other people who will have equity in your company too. Just to make sure you say, okay, if I'm gonna give this person this much, and this person that much, this person this much, wait a second, what am I left with? So, and after investors come in, so factor that into that process as well.
Lars?
I wonder do you guys think there is a role for, like a contract to perm type of analogy, or a trial period for these kind of key early hires, where, in my experience, I've had good fits and bad fits, and it's kind of exponential, either direction on fit and execution. Chemistry is so important. Is there a place for that in that recruiting process, hiring process?
Sure. I mean, for co-founders, I've never done a specific, contractor to founder or something like that. But a lot of that takes care of itself, and there's vesting, and if a co-founder doesn't work out, then they get certain shares. I love to hire anyone I can hire as a contractor first. I do. Generally, I can't if they're at another full-time job. So I love the cases where they're not working, or their working is, ending or something like that. Then I will, in that situation, I'll almost always try to start with a contractor position first.
Regardless of the functional domain.
Well, someone senior might say, look, dude, I'm not going to be your VP of marketing contractor. But I actually have had people be contractor for VP of marketing twice. So, yeah, I guess you can do it.
I think you have to think about, some jobs take a certain amount of knowledge and they just need to get in there, so it's kind of, the contracting doesn't even make sense because they're half in and they're half out. So that's one dimension. The second is, I think, the one that Mike's talking about is, it's great if you can do it because you pretty much know, very quickly. But the number of people who can do it, either because they have another job or just even, I don't know, ego or personality-wise, a lot of people are just like, look, either decide I'm in the team and then I'll come in and do a great job, or decide I'm not right. It's a luxury I think you normally don't have. And if you follow the, hire slow and fire fast, I think a lot of times people, we saw this in our company, we were too slow to bring people on sometimes. There were a risk because we felt like, we could never get rid of them. And realized, you can, you're 2 months in, or 6 weeks, or 3 days, 3 days is a little short. You'll know by then if they're not working out, and they would just pull the trigger more quickly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that I've seen an inverse correlation with the quality of people and the people who are willing to do contractor, unless there's some other kind of happening. Like, I know some female friends that have just had a kid and are willing to try a little bit before they actually decide if that's the place they want to do transition. But a lot of the highest quality people are like, make a decision. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out on both sides. So it's a luxury if you can do it, but sure.
In California, you don't have to worry about that. It's semantics. It's an at-will state, so you can fire anybody for any reason, no reason, and vice versa. And watch out on the contractor side, because it's not up to you to decide whether that person's a contractor or an employee. There's kind of guidelines, legal guidelines, and actually that's one of the areas where most of our clients make mistakes. Like, they're contractors. Like, just because you say that they're a contractor doesn't make them a contractor.
Robert?
Talk about the impact in the beginning of the company of the right office space and how that impacts, I guess, team dynamics. So 3 options. One is like build out of your house garage. The second is kind of like new age colo, where it's like you and 3 people with 10 other startups. Versus, and then, I don't know, getting office space of some sort that's your own. Do you guys have, I guess, best practices or clear things to avoid in terms of choosing that, and how it kind of builds that initial team dynamic for the 1 employee to, say, 5 employee time frame?
For us, it did. Definitely. I mean, we have Class A space right on Market Street. It's nice. It's much nicer than I ever need. I mean, Emily can attest. I wore flip-flops every day when I was here at business school. People see me and they're like, "What's wrong with you?" But our business is kind of in the professional services side, right? And most of our employees come from HR roles. They're not the type of individual who says, "Hey, just put a door on 2 cinder blocks, and as long as my monitor is big enough, I don't care." So it has to do a lot with the type of company and the type of employees. I actually specifically asked some of our employees after they joined, like, how much of the office space mattered? And like, it made a big difference. So it kind of depends on who you're trying to hire.
Ning Ning.
I have a question on insurance. So I'm aware of E&O insurance, but some insurance brokers are also telling me that there's, for internet startup, that there's specific internet startup, like internet insurance. How important is that, and at what point do you get it? Is that something to even think about?
Yeah. One thing to remember is that brokers, they make money if you buy, right? So they don't make any money if you don't buy. So just watch out when they say, oh, you're an internet company, you need this insurance and this insurance and this insurance.
So what is your experience?
The only insurance that you will need, well, as soon as you have employees, is workers' compensation. That's the only one that's required by law. After that, I'd wait until you have if you're in social networking, you think there's a risk there, then maybe. But usually it's more related to once you have a partnership or a client or somebody saying, I'm ready to engage in business with you, but I want you to have these insurances in place. But until then, unless, again, it's hard without having specifics, the general rule is you probably don't need it.
You're shaking your head, Mike, you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, it's always like, it's a sign of badge of honor once you have to get liability insurance. Pepsi was the one who caused us to get liability insurance for X-Fire and 2 million coverage. Sometimes you can negotiate them down, they want 5 million coverage, you tell Pepsi, we have 0, how about if we get a $2 million coverage? So, yeah, just, Brian's right, just usually wait on those until your customer makes you do it.
So we have a ratings, or the site will have ratings that affect maybe someone's professional, income. Is that, would you say that means you should?
So, I mean,
Not necessarily.
I'm Mr. Heretic, right? No one's gonna sue you when you don't have any money, right? Because when you're a tiny little startup, you don't have any, it's like you're bulletproof because you don't have any assets. So once you start having money, then you become a target.
Sine?
Question was on hiring a CEO, for instance, and me and my partner, we both been in industry 20 years. We want to have a CEO just because we don't want to do it. And kind of, you want an easy life. Get the company started, get it going nice. And then get a guy to basically take it over. Question is, what stage we should be looking to get the guy, and where do I find such a guy, basically?
Or gal.
Or a guy. Absolutely.
And that's really hard without knowing the specifics of your business. So, I mean, I think that.
It's a hardware, it's internet hardware, the switches.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's, a lot of times from an investment perspective, we don't necessarily like to hear that. So not necessarily that you think that you're going to need to bring a CEO at a certain time, but the idea that you think you're going to get started and the CEO will come and take it over. What we found is a lot of the most successful companies have the passionate entrepreneur that's involved at some level with the organization throughout the history. In terms of when is the right time, I think you look at inflection points, right? I think that to be able to do it for as long as you can and can stand it, as the company is progressing, so you can bring in the highest caliber talent to lead the company. Because it's one of those trade-offs, right? You want to bring in somebody that you want to actually take your baby, right? It's essentially like and make it as successful as possible. And because of that, the highest quality usually, not all the time, but typically want to see some traction and success to the extent to which you can actually build the business as much and as long as you can. That's what I would recommend.
Just to correct, we do intend to stay in the company, we just don't want to be, with families and all, you want someone who is more, a lot of sales will happen on the East Coast side and Wall Street kind of thing, so you want to, travel is kind of what you're trying to work with.
So I think we've come to the end, and I want to thank you for your attention. And I can say from experience, you are hearing some things that are very important for you as an entrepreneur.